How's it going, everybody? Daner here with North Central Coins, and welcome back to another episode of the most rare and valuable coins in Canada. Today we're going to be counting down my picks for the top 12 most valuable Canadian dimes of all time that you can find in your collection or by searching your pocket change, and if identified correctly, can be worth some buku amounts of money. Even though these aren't your average pieces of currency, just about anyone can find these Canadian coins if you do know what to look for. In this video, we will explore the historical context of these Holy Grail coins and delve into why they hold such importance in Canadian numismatic history. Additionally, we will discuss any distinguishing and identifying features, their significance among collectors, and also the potential value if you are ever to discover a legitimate example. Before I do get into this, I would really appreciate if you guys would smash that thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and also ring that bell notification so you can follow along with my new content as it is being released. And make sure to stay to the end of the video if you would like to find out which is the most valuable Canadian 10-cent coin that you can find. Then without further ado, what do you say we get right into it and break down my picks for the top 12 most valuable Canadian dimes? Let's get it, guys. So as I start this list off, I'm going to work my way from number 12 being the least valuable all the way up to number 1 being the most valuable Canadian 10-cent coin that you can find. I'm going to give you guys the high end and also some low end appraisals. Some of the coins don't actually have any high end values listed, so I might give my appraisals as we go along. But all of that being said, what do you say we start this list off with number 12, which is going to be the 2000p Canadian dime. The reason that the 2000p Canadian dime is so rare is that it was not actually issued for circulation. It was only made for testing and issued to vending machine companies, so very few of these coins have been accounted for, and if you do find one of them in the wild, it can be worth some pretty decent money. Now, if you find one of these and it's in good shape, it can be worth around $500 for an MS60, around $1,000 for an MS64, and all the way up to $2,500 for an MS67 example. If you do find one of these and it's kind of beat up and worn and been put through the meat grinder, you can still probably get anywhere from $50 to $100. To identify the 2000p dime, what you have to do is flip over to the obverse of the coin and look for a little P mint mark underneath the bust of Queen Elizabeth II, and then it will have the date of 2000 on the reverse. If you can identify both of those, then you have yourself a fairly rare Canadian dime. Number 11 is going to be the 1913 King George V broad leaves 10-cent coin. Now, there are two varieties for the 1913. Those varieties are the small leaves and the broad leaves, the broad leaves being the more rare and valuable of the two varieties. I will show an example of what the broad leaves look like right now, but if you can identify that, it can be worth around $41 for an AG3, around $150 for a VG8, and around $3,000 for an AU50. So this is a really good coin that you could look for, and it can be worth some really good money on the low end. Even if you find one in a scrap silver purchase, it's worth around $50, even at the absolute bottom of the Sheldon scale. Now, if you do find one and it scores in the mint state range, it can be worth around $33,000 for an MS63 example, and that is for the 1913 King George V broadleaf 10-cent coin. Number 10 on this list is going to be a Queen Victoria 10-cent coin, and it is actually the first year for the Canadian 10-cent coins being introduced into circulation, and that is 1858. Now, if you want to be able to get the most amount of money out of this coin, you need to identify a variety, and that variety is the 8/5 variety for the 1858. Now, to identify this, what you need to do is look at the second digit of 8 in the date 1858. Now, what happened was a 5 was struck over the first 8, which was actually defective. Now, the top of the 5 clearly appears at the top of this digit of the second 8 in the date. So if you can identify the 8/5 variety, it can be an extremely rare Canadian dime that can be worth around $500 for an AG3, $2,000 for an F12, and all the way up to $10,000 for an AU50. So this is an extremely rare Canadian 10-cent coin that can be worth a lot of money. Even on the very bottom of the Sheldon scale, it is worth $500. So if you ever come across any 1858 Canadian dimes, I definitely suggest that you take a look at that second 8 in the date, and if it looks like maybe there is an 8 stamped over a 5 or any other digits, then you probably have yourself a fairly rare variety. Number 9 on this list is going to be the 1893 Queen Victoria 10-cent coin, and this is the Obverse number 5 round top 3 variety. Now it can be a little bit tricky to identify the different obverse varieties for the Queen Victoria coins. I definitely suggest that you go to the website coinsincanada.com, or you maybe pick yourself up a coin guide so you have a reference. But the best tip that I can give you is to differentiate between the different Queen Victoria obverse varieties. It will usually gravitate around the detail in the ear. So I will show an example of what the Obverse number 5 looks like, and you are also looking for the round top 3. Now there are 2 different varieties for the 3 in the 1893. There is a pointed top and then there is a round top, and you are looking for the round top, which will look more rounded at the top of the 3. In terms of value, it can be worth around $1,500 for an AG3 and all the way up to $10,000 for a VF20 example. There are currently less than 5 certified examples of the 1893 Obverse number 5 round top 3, and if you were able to find one and it scored in the mid-state range, you could easily be talking a $50,000 to $100,000 coin. Number 8 on this list is going to be the 1884 Queen Victoria 10-cent coin. You don't need to identify any errors or varieties, and this will not have a mint mark. It is the 1884 without any mint marks. Now, if you can find the date of 1884, it can be worth around $100 at the bottom of the Sheldon scale for a beat up and worn example. But as we start to get into the mid-state range, we see some pretty big price jumps. It can be worth around $10,000 for an MS60, around $15,000 for an MS62, and all the way up to $25,000 for an MS63, which is currently the highest appraised known example. If you were able to find one and it scored any higher, you could easily be talking a $50,000 coin, and that is for the 1884. Number 7 on this list is going to be one of the most infamous and sought after of the modern Canadian dimes, and that is the 1969 large date. In the year 1969, there were 2 different varieties for dimes struck. There is the small date, which is much more common, and then there is an extremely rare and scarce large date variety. The best way that I can suggest to check for the large date is to save a 1968 Canadian dime if you ever find one, and the large date should appear around the same size as the text on the 1968 dime. Now there are currently only a few known examples of the 1969 large date that have been accounted for. It is one of the most searched for dimes and the one that everybody looks for, and probably the one that you have one of the best chances of finding in your pocket change on this list if you were to find one. In terms of its value, on the low end, it can be worth around $11,000 for an F12 and all the way up to $21,000 for an AU50 example, and that is for the 1969 large date Canadian dime. Number 6 on this list is going to be the 1875 Heat and Mint Queen Victoria 10-cent coin. So to identify this coin, what you want to do is look at the reverse underneath the date for a little H mint mark. If you can identify that, it means that it was struck at the Heat and Mint in Birmingham, and it makes it a fairly rare 10-cent coin that can be worth around $80 for an AG3 example. So that is at the bottom of the Sheldon scale. But as we start to get into the mid-state range, it can be worth around $8,800 for an MS60, around $20,000 for an MS63, and all the way up to $27,000 for an MS64, and that is for the 1875 Heat and Mint 10-cent coin. Number 5 on this list is going to be the 1886 Obverse 5 variety large pointed 6 Queen Victoria 10-cent coin. Now to identify the Obverse 5 variety, what you want to do is flip over to the obverse of the coin and take a look at Queen Victoria's ear. I will show an example of what you want to look for, but it can be pretty tricky to identify the different obverse varieties for the Queen Victoria coins. But if you can identify the obverse number 5, then you want to flip over to the reverse and take a look at the 6, which is the final digit in the date of 1886. Now, the large 6 will appear slightly larger and more spaced out than the small 6, and then you are also looking for the pointed 6. So at the top tip of the 6, you want it to come to a small point rather than being the typical circular shape that you would see at the end of the 6. Now, if you can identify the obverse number 5 and the large pointed 6, it can be worth around $3,920 for an MS60, around $9,000 for an MS63, and all the way up to $23,000 for an MS64 example, and that is for the 1886 obverse number 5 large pointed 6. Number 4, which is going to be the 1889 Queen Victoria 10-cent coin. You don't need to identify any errors or varieties for this date, you just simply need to find the date of 1889. Now, if you can identify that, this can be an extremely valuable 10-cent coin. Even on the low end, it can be worth around $350 at the very bottom of the Sheldon scale. So this would be a great one that you could find in a scrap silver purchase and make a very good profit off of. If you could cherry pick one of these off of a lot on eBay or Facebook Marketplace, you should definitely keep your eyes open for some of these limited dates. So if you can find the 1889, it can be worth around $340 for an AG3, it can be worth around $20,000 for an MS60, and all the way up to $43,000 for an MS63. If you're able to find one and it scored any higher, I'm sure it could be worth anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000, and that is for the 1889 Queen Victoria 10-cent coin. Number 3 on this list is going to be the 1893 Queen Victoria Obverse number 6 round top 3. So to identify the obverse number 6, you want to flip over and take a look at the bust of Queen Victoria, particularly the detail in her ear. I will show you an example of what the obverse number 6 variety looks like. And then you want to flip over to the reverse of the coin and take a look at the last digit of 3 in the date 1893. Now you are looking for the round top 3. To identify the round top 3, what you want to do is take a look at the top right hand side of the digit of 3, and if it looks like it is rounded, then it is the round top, and if it looks like it comes off to a point facing off to the right hand side, then it is the pointed 3. Now if you can identify the obverse 6 and the round top 3, the 1893 can be worth around $20,000 for an MS60, around $30,000 for an MS62, and all the way up to $49,000 for an MS63. If you found one and it graded any higher, I don't doubt that you could easily get anywhere from $75,000 to $100,000 for the 1893 obverse number 6 round top 3. Number 2 is going to be the 1871 H mint mark Mule 10-cent coin. In the year 1871, a fascinating anomaly occurred in the production process of some Newfoundland 10-cent coins. It was during this phase that some of these coins were inadvertently struck using the reverse die intended for Canada's 10-cent coin. This resulted in the creation of these incredibly unique Mule coins, which blend elements from the different coin designs, bridging the gap between Newfoundland and Canada's numismatic heritage. Now to identify the 1871 Mule coin, what you want to do is flip over to the obverse of the coin, which should have the Newfoundland obverse design with the Newfoundland wording running along the bottom. And then if you flip over to the reverse, it should have the typical Canadian 10-cent reverse design, and there should actually be H mint marks on the obverse and the reverse of the coin. Now, I couldn't actually find any price estimates on any websites or in any coin guides, but if I had to give my own estimate on this coin, I don't doubt that you could easily get $5,000 for this if you found it even in the most beat up of conditions. There are only 2 known examples currently of this coin, and if you did find one and it scored in the mint state range, it could easily be worth up to $100,000. Some of these mules are incredibly rare, and the fact that this shares both the Canadian and Newfoundland coin heritage history makes it even more rare and probably sought after by collectors. Well, we have made it to number 1 on this list, and number 1 is going to be the 1936 dot dime. Now, the 1936 dot dime wasn't actually issued for circulation. It comes out of a specimen set. Canadian specimen sets issued before the year 1970 are incredibly rare, and in some cases they only issued a few sets. In 1936, I'm not sure exactly how many sets they did issue, but I'm guessing it's somewhere around 10 sets or less. Now, to identify the 1936 dot dime, what you want to do is take a look under the date on the reverse of the coin and look for a small dot, which is an identification mark. Now, these are incredibly rare, and chances are if you do ever find one of the 1936 dots, it's probably going to be a counterfeit, considering that these do come out of specimen sets. A lot of people will make videos about them, but they don't actually understand the rarity of Canadian specimen coins. Canadian pre-1970 specimen coins are so rare. In some cases, they only made 10 sets, they only made 100 sets, or they only made 1,000. So your chances of ever coming across these in your pocket change is pretty much slim to nil, but never say never. I may have actually found a 1970 Canadian specimen nickel in one of my coin roll hunts. I still need to send it off to get authenticated, but one of these days I will definitely make a video about that. In terms of the value for the 1936 dot specimen dime, it can be worth around $150,000 for an SP63, which is the designation that specimen coins get. Instead of mint state, they get specimen. And this bad boy can be worth all the way up to $245,000 for an SP65 example, and that is for the 1936 dot specimen dime. Now, what do you guys think about my picks for the 12 most valuable Canadian dimes of all time? What would you do if you ever found a legitimate example, or if you ever have found any of the coins discussed in this video? Let me know down in the comments. I would love to know. Also, I would really appreciate if you guys would smash that thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and also ring that bell notification so you can follow along with my new content as it is being released. But I think that is pretty much going to do it for this one, folks. So until the next one, everybody, peace out and have a good one, y'all.